Hi, welcome everybody to the Be Healthy Summit and welcome Paul Grilley.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you on, Paul. Paul is an internationally renowned and celebrated master yoga teacher specializing in the method of yin yoga. His best-selling Anatomy for Yoga program is a paradigm-shifting contemporary training course celebrated by senior yoga teachers and collected by tens of thousands of students from around the world. Paul's teachings offer an extraordinary experience and study for anyone interested in deepening their understanding of anatomy and yoga practice. He earned an MA from St. John's College, Santa Fe in summer of 2000 and an honorary PhD in 2005 from the California Institute for Human Science for his efforts to clarify the latest theories on fascia and its relevance to the practice of Hatha yoga. Thank you, Paul, for coming on. I'm super excited to have you on. And Paul is actually my yin yoga teacher. I had a whole bunch of yoga teacher trainings before I met Paul, and then Paul was the one who really rocked my yoga world and changed everything. Yeah, you did for sure. So, Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Why did you become a yoga teacher?
Well, that's a good one. Become a yoga teacher. That sort of happened by default. You know, I started yoga in 1978, if I have the timeline still correct in my own mind, 78, 79. And there was no profession of teaching yoga, at least not in the United States, and not in the state where I grew up in the United States. I grew up in it's a big state, but it's about a very small population, Montana. And, you know, yoga itself was virtually unheard of, at least in my high school circles. And the idea of teaching yoga for a living, that wasn't even on the charts. So I became interested in yoga after reading the autobiography of a yogi, but you know, I didn't see myself as a spiritual teacher, so I wasn't going to go out and teach meditation. So I just sort of fell into what I think a lot of people do when you first sort of fall in love with yoga. It's like, well, anything Indian, let's go look at what else the Indians have been doing. And Hatha yoga was, you know, right at the top. And I sort of came from a background of health and physiology, and I was a young man, 20 years old. I was very interested in my own bodybuilding and athletic things. And so it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to be a spiritual teacher, but I can slide in and teach Hatha yoga. And I think that's how it started. That probably would have died there, you know, fairly soon, except that I took the step of moving still at like the age 20, 21 down to Los Angeles, which to me was as far away from the type of world that I grew up with as you can imagine. And there was actually, even in that huge population, 12 million people within a 100-mile radius, there wasn't that much yoga, but there was enough to go like, oh yeah, there are people here who actually teach yoga. And I sort of I thought it was going to be a brief excursus there in LA, a couple of years maybe in my plans, but I ended up staying there 13 years, I think, and I earned my living as a yoga teacher, which I think is one of the few cities in the country at the time that you could have earned a living as a yoga teacher. I think there were yoga teachers everywhere. But to earn a living as a yoga teacher, that was just coming on the scene. It was just sort of filling in some of the gaps that all the Hollywood celebrity personal trainers had already pioneered. You know, celebrities have needed to be in shape and healthy, and California celebrities were the paradigm of that. And so classes that service them, personal trainers that service that population existed in LA. And so I needed a way to earn a living while I was studying yoga. And the easiest way to do that was to teach other people yoga. And so I sort of fell into the career backwards. And I actually thought that if I ever left LA, I'd probably have to find a different career. It so happened it didn't turn out that way because the yoga boom just kept booming and booming. But I always sort of thought that being a Hatha yoga teacher, this is a Los Angeles career, you know, maybe a Berlin type of career. It's not an everyday, wherever you want to go career. And I think that's one of the big changes in the world today.
Yeah, and then you went from yang yoga to yin yoga.
Yeah.
Why did that happen, and what's the difference?
It happened for me because I was on the search for a greater range of motion, like anyone else taking up the study of yoga. If you read the books or if your teachers are teaching you, it's implied that you can master all of these yoga poses if you work hard enough and long enough. That is the implication. And I had been working at yoga for 9 years, 8, 9 years, and some things I could do, and other things I felt like, man, I cannot do these things. And I understood, what parts of the body needed to do what in order to do these poses. And I was a little confounded as to why, working as hard as I did, I couldn't do what some of my students could do from the very first day. Well, had tried various forms of yoga at that time, all of which I would now categorize as yang forms of yoga: hot, sweaty, vinyasa, heated room, multiple repetitions of a pose, like 100 wheels in a day. Susie and I used to do that for a period of time, all of which I would now categorize as yang yoga. And then about 1988, approximately, I saw an interview of Polly Zink on a LA Access Television public channel. And it was just this interview between him and another guy, very simple public access TV. And I was very impressed by Polly and how he answered all the questions about his yoga practice and everything. I didn't know who he was, but he talked about doing poses long and gentle for a long period of time. And I thought, that's the one thing I haven't done. I've done Bikram yoga, I've done Ashtanga yoga, I've done half-breed mixes in between yoga, but I've never done poses relaxed for minutes at a time. So maybe this is why I'm not a poster boy for yoga, why I can't, balance in a back bend that would impress anybody on a poster. I thought, oh, wow, this is it. I've been doing the same type of yoga. I need to do a different type of yoga. And so I contacted Polly. I can't remember how that went. I think I knew a guy who knew him, one of those coincidence things. And he's a great guy, very generous, very open. And, let me come to his class once a week, I think it was at that time, for maybe a year. And it was pretty much the same type of class every day. There was no secret to it. He didn't have any mystical things to say or to share, which is one of the things I really liked about him. He was very straightforward. He says, look, it just takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of practice. And like anything, there was a bit of a honeymoon phase where you feel like, oh my God, this is so different. I'm changing a lot. I'm finally going to be the poster boy for yoga I've always wanted to be, and people will respect me as a teacher and I can earn a living. But that crescendoed pretty quick. I'd only been doing yoga by 8, 9 years by then. So, the honeymoon phase lasted for a little bit of time, but then my progress stopped again. But in a very slow way, it didn't matter to me very much anymore. That's a simplification, but I became so happy with how the yoga left me feeling, how yin yoga left me feeling, how I didn't dread, okay, here we go, Ashtanga level 3, 6 o'clock in the morning. It was like, no, I actually look forward to doing this practice. It's easy to start. It's pleasant to do. And when I'm done, I feel great. And so even though I didn't get the, oh, I'm a superstar, bendy kind of person results, as I let that go reluctantly, I became very pleased and enthralled with, yeah, I'm not a superstar, flexible guy, but man, this yoga really feels good. And that's how I went from yang to yin. I went from, I want to do yin yoga because maybe this is the final magic key that will make me a poster boy for yoga. And in the end, I kept at it, even when I knew that was no longer going to be true, because of how it left me feeling, of how, like I used to wake up sore every day in yoga. I'm sure most Ashtanga or other vigorous athletes can relate to that. It's part of being an athlete. You wake up sore. But it was nice to not wake up sore it was nice to wake up feeling like, wow, I feel pretty good. And after, 8, 9 years of being sore literally every day, it was nice to have a 2, 3 year honeymoon there of, I'm just doing yin yoga. I'm tired of waking up sore every day. So it went from, I want to really become flexible to, it's great not to be sore every day.
Yeah, and you did even more. You revolutionized something there, because yang yoga usually gets combined with Ayurveda, but you combine it with traditional Chinese medicine, which was completely new. Can you go a little bit more into that? What did you do there?
That was because of my teacher, Dr. Motoyama. Dr. Motoyama was my spiritual meditation teacher. And Dr. Motoyama was also a PhD scientist. He had 2 PhD degrees in different fields of study. One was in philosophy and one was in physiological psychology. And his work was all about yoga and meditation, chakra meditation in particular, and studying its effects. But he looking for an explanation for how does pranayama work, how does chakra meditation work. He's the one who brought in the idea of the Chinese meridians. The first book of his that I read that introduced me to him and to his work is a book that's still in print. It's very old now. It's probably 40 years old, I would think. And it's called Theories of the Chakras. And in that book, it covers a lot of ground, that book. But in one of the chapters, or a couple of the chapters, he outlines what to me is a very convincing argument of what did the Upanishads, the Yoga Upanishads and the classic Upanishads, what did they say about energy and meridians? Because it wasn't systematic in those texts. They just gave you as much as you needed. And he actually has a chart in the book that tabulates the 10 meridians that are sort of traditional in the yogic tradition, the nadis they're called. And he compared that to a chart of classical Chinese meridians. And it's a pretty convincing argument that they're talking about the same system. It's just that none of the existing Upanishads was as systematic and as complete as the Chinese meridian system. And it's a very, to me, it's the argument and the resulting graph or tabulation that's in that book, Theories of the Chakras, says, oh yeah, we're talking about the same system here. And since the Chinese system, for whatever historical accidental reason, is more detailed and more exact and more complete, well, let's use that system to describe yoga practice, which is essentially the conclusion Dr. Motoyama came to. And it's the conclusion, and since he was way ahead of me intellectually, spiritually, and and philosophically, I thought, well, I'm going to use his system as well. So really, it was just me jumping on board Dr. Motoyama's train. Like he felt that the meridian system as preserved in the Chinese text was not different, not better, just more complete and more exact than what has survived in the Indian literature. Dr. Motoyama, I think, would say, look, it used to be that this was one system that was shared by a wider world population. But for whatever historical reasons, only fragments of it came down to us through the Indian tradition. And it was more completely preserved and perpetuated in the Chinese texts. So that's how that sort of came about, is Dr. Motoyama's work, where he felt that the chakra system, the nadi system, and the meridian system, they're all one energetic system.
Yes, and you also dove into the topic of fascia really early. Now it's a popular topic, but you have been talking about that for many, many years. So what can yin yoga do for our fascia and our health and overall?
Well, I think that yin yoga has a unique contribution to make. If it were a different era of time, I'd be arguing also that yang yoga has a unique contribution to make. It just that so happens that yang yoga is very popular. It needs no justification for its practice. Everyone does it, likes it. Whereas yin yoga, at least 20, 30 years ago, was a very new practice. So you sort of had to justify, why are you doing things so differently with yin? I don't think yin is a superior practice in every way, but it does have some unique contributions to offer. And I have used an analogy for years, and no analogy is perfect, but this analogy is pretty good. is that I used to think of the chi flowing in your body. The analogy is water flowing through an irrigation ditch. You need two things to get that water to your crops. One, you need enough flow of water. You can't just have a little trickle of water. It's not going to make it all the way out to all of your crops. And two, the ditch needs to be in good repair. The ditch needs to be dredged out of weeds and mud and debris. And I believe that what Yang Yoga does very effectively is move the water, increase the fluid movement through your tissues. That's why you get hot and sweaty and red, and your tissues get slightly inflamed and pumped up with fluid, that you're actually literally pushing more fluid through the tissues, which is very, very important. Otherwise, your chi could stagnate. But the other aspect of that is you need to repair these ditches. You need to clear the mud out. You need to clear out the debris that gathers, or the waste products, or the analogy in your body, the tearing and the ripping, or not ripping, but the wearing of your fascia. You can't do yang without wearing some of your tissues. And I think what yin does very effectively is speed up the recovery process that's natural to the body. When you're young, maybe, and you're in your 20s, you can maybe get away without doing much yin because you have so much shakti, you have so much jing in your body that even if you beat yourself to death doing 2 Ashtanga classes a day, there's enough jing in your body, enough chi to kind of clear the debris and keep things going. But as you get older, that energy slowly declines in its manifestation. And I think as you get older, you need to be more deliberate in assisting your body's recovery. And that's acupuncture, that's acupressure, that's massage, and that's yin yoga. I think yin yoga is a way to rehabilitate and rejuvenate the wear and tear that life and strong yang activities put onto your body. I believe that's yin's unique contribution. It helps in the recovery phase and keeping the tissues pliable. And modern research shows that the hydration of the tissues, the water content of the tissues, goes up following yin yoga practice. And that is sort of in the Chinese medicine viewpoint, as you're probably intimately aware of. You know, as you get older, you literally dry out. You get wrinkles in your face and everything because literally your body cannot hold the fluid in the channels that puffed out your skin and gave you that glow when you were young. And yin yoga helps the body, without going into excruciating, nauseating detail, yin yoga helps the body retain the fluid in the channels and give you that radiant, healthy, youth-like appearance. And that's also why it helps with the soreness that comes from doing yang types of activities. It helps speed up the recovery process. So I think that's what makes yin unique and a good contribution. And I just want to say, again, because it's so important, I don't think yin is superior to yang. I don't think exhale is superior to inhale. But I do think that you need to have both elements in a practice.
For sure, but I totally agree with you. I also had quite a few long-lasting injuries from my yang practice, and they could finally heal in my yin yoga practice. Yeah, for sure.
And you know, I've overstrained myself doing yin yoga, not in the same type of way. The injuries from overtraining in yin yoga aren't the same as the injuries of ripping your cartilage in yang yoga. But you can overtrain yin yoga if you don't balance it with yang yoga. So again, I just think that even though I'm known as the yin yoga guy, and I'm happy to be that guy, I'm happy to be the face of yin yoga. It's like the very name yin yoga, the reason why we didn't use Polly Zink's original name of Taoist yoga is because yin yoga is only 1/2 of the equation for health.
Yeah. And one important thing that you focus on in the practice is the rebound. Can you go a little bit more into that, please?
Yeah, the rebound has become more and more prominent in our practice, in our minds. It goes back to the very early books in yoga. I think if you go back and read books that were published in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there weren't many books that were published before then. It was always this: do a pose, lay down on your back, shavasana. Do a pose, lay down on your back, shavasana. That was the characteristic of yoga before vinyasa yoga. Do a pose, lay on your back. Do a pose, lay on your back. And the big revolution with Ashtanga and Vinyasa was no, we're not going to do a pose and lay down. We're going to just go through these postures with linking movements and not stop for 90 minutes. That was the revolution of the modern era. Was we're not going to do this pose, relax, pose, relax, pose, relax thing. That's for, vegetarians who don't lift weights and live in an ashram. It's like, we're going to do this hot, sexy, sweaty yoga that prepares us for the angst and activity of urban living. And it's a great thing. It's a great modification or evolution of yoga. But if you go back to, well, why were we doing this? Do a pose, lay on your back, do a pose, lay on your back. Why was that the thing for so long? And I believe it's because one of the aspects of yoga is it can make you aware of energy movement in your body. And I think the rebound after a pose is the ideal time to feel that. Now you can get that in yang yoga too, but it sort of hits you all at once at the end after 90 minutes you lay down. And that's great. But in yin yoga, you can get it after every pose, and you can literally feel the difference between a right side 5-minute forward bend and a left side forward bend. And by doing that with every pose, or doing it at least more frequently in yin yoga, I think you become more intimate with your body. And I think you become more familiar with left and right differences, upper and lower differences, and energy flow in your body. And I think that's the power of the rebound. Is it develops introspection, and it develops an awareness of energy movement in your body. And I think that's the key. That's my, as you know, I'm 60 now, and the longer I'm at it and the more I'm involved in yoga, the more I want to test for myself whether the old theories are true. Is there such a thing as chi? Acupuncturists talk about it. Yogis call it prana, and then they say it. But you're going to have a hard time having any university scientists say that there's such a thing as chi. That's a feudalistic superstition. And it's like, I'm going like, I don't think that's true. I understand why the evidence for it might be weak. But I think that the next, everyone predicts the next revolution in science, and most of us are usually wrong. You don't see the next revolution coming. But I think the next evolution in medicine that will be huge is whether or not the evidence for chi is viable, whether there is a need to expand our conception of the world to include a life force, would make a huge difference in the world. I can't predict if it's going to happen tomorrow or 10 years or 100 years. But I think it's a hugely important thing. And I think that the rebound is the first step towards the people feeling energy move in their body. And I think that there are some experiments that Dr. Motoyama did. Remember, he did dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, if not thousands of readings and dozens of meticulous experiments, trying to document that the meridians existed, that chi flowed in the meridians, that chakras existed, chakras influenced the meridians, all of which is just still lying around in his books and his publications, waiting to be picked up by some well-funded research center. And so to me, the rebound is the very, 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 very start, the very beginning of becoming aware of energy movement in your body, and that this energy movement is unique. It is not electrical nerve impulse. It is not biochemical, or at least it's not these things only. There's something unique that moves in us, that keeps us healthy, that the only thing to call it is a life force, as opposed to the inanimate forces, electricity, magnetism, gravity, the nuclear forces. That's all physics recognizes. And all of the meditation practices down through the eons, all of the Oriental medical practices, they're all postulated on another type of force, or varieties of that force, varieties of chi, varieties of prana. And I think that that's really important, becoming aware of that and talking about it, and maybe trying to resurrect some of Dr. Motoyama's experiments that showed that chi, how it travels, how it affects you, how it is affected by your mind, is unique. And it cannot be put into the box of that's electrical, that's chemical, that's magnetic. It doesn't fit into those boxes. And I think that it's somehow life affirming that human beings have an innate ability to feel an energy inside them that we do not yet have the machines that can measure. That just gives me a personal sort of egotistical human satisfaction that we're still more subtle than a machine.
For sure. But it, in my experience, it doesn't stop there. It's not just on the physical level, it goes even deeper. I have seen so many students start crying when they go into the rebound or get in touch with deep emotions. What do you think happens there?
Well, I think that's, again, getting back to Dr. Motoyama's system. Dr. Motoyama put forward the theory, which I had not seen articulated anywhere else. It might have been, but I've not read it, that the chakras mediate the transformation of energy between 3 dimensions of our existence. That's their function. That's a very important thing. Chakras mediate and transform the energies from 3 dimensions of existence. The lowest dimension is the chi dimension that influences the physical body. The next dimension up is the astral dimension, which is what we're referring to now, memory and emotion. And then the dimension above that actually has to do with thought, understanding, insight, and that the chakras exist to transmute energy from one dimension to another. And so I think that when people are still long enough in a pose that's deliberately trying to affect their physical body, their chi flow, when you're still long enough, Dr. Motoyama's theory, which is the theory I subscribe to, is that when you gather energy to a place and hold it there, particularly along your spine, when you gather that energy to a place and you hold it there, the function of the chakras is to convert that energy to the next highest dimension. Or sometimes it's the opposite, to go from an emotional dimension to the physical. But when you do a pose, you hold it for a long time, and maybe you do several similar poses, so you're staying on a certain area. The function, the natural function of the chakra is to say, wow, we have a lot of physical energy gathered here, more than we need. Let's convert that to the astral. Well, part of that process is that you awaken memories and events, emotional memories and events that are associated with that particular chakra. And I think that's what people are feeling. And so again, it's I just jumped on board Dr. Motoyama's train of what are chakras? Why do we have them? Why do we need them? And Dr. Motoyama is the only guy I know who put forward the ideas. Their function is to balance and transmute the energy between the 3 dimensions of our existence. That's what they do. And so if you have a strong physical practice, strong moving energy, then it's inevitable. If you focus it along the spine, you're stressing the spine even modestly for minutes at a time, and then repetitively, you're going to bring right up to the surface strong emotions and memories. And I think that's why not just crying happens and tearful release happens in a yin yoga rebound, but people become interested in meditation even when you don't talk about it. You don't even bring it forward in your class. It's like, look, I'm not here to brainwash you into meditating. But I've seen that happen countless times in my career, where people who, come because they have a bad back, they have no interest in meditation, zero, maybe even antipathy towards meditation, and becoming indoctrinated and, oh my God, I'm a hippie. And I've seen countless times where it's like they themselves become interested in meditation because of what that rebound, how it's affecting them. It awakens an innate sense to want to know more about themselves and their mind and their emotions. So I think that's what's happening, is the chakras are doing their job. The chakras are transmuting excess energy in the chi dimension into astral energy. And the first thing you have to do to awaken the astral body is to remove the blockages there that are formed by unprocessed, unrecognized, and unreconciled emotions and memories.
Yeah. Can you go a little bit deeper into what meditation is and what it can do for us? What can it do for our health?
Meditations is like talking about yoga. It's such a broad thing, and people use that word in all kinds of levels and ways and meanings. So first thing I need to do to answer that question to say, what do I think chakra meditation is? Because even people who practice chakra meditation have different theories about what it does. So this is Paul Grilley interpreting Dr. Motoyama's theory about chakra meditation. So it's a pretty narrow slice of the meditation world. And to me, it gets back to the chakras transmute energy from the three dimensions. That whether you do it through physical posture, or whether you do it more subtly through breath work, or whether you do it even more subtly through mental mantra or mental contemplation, which is the thought world, the highest dimension of our existence, that illness is the result of karma manifesting of transgressions that we have made in the physical, in the emotional, or in the thinking world, how we interpret life's events. That illness is a misalignment of our behavior with our circumstances. And that what we're trying to do in any illness is sort of remove the immediate consequences of the illness. But deeper than that would be, well, this illness keeps coming back. You have a tendency towards this type of illness because of your karma. This person has a tendency towards this type of illness because of their karma. So I think medicine has two poles to it, and I think they're both equally good. I think if you have a tumor, I think if your doctor recommends that it's going to be very successful to cut that tumor out, I think you should instantly cut that tumor out. But the deeper problem is, why did the tumor manifest? And in my theory, in my set of beliefs, I don't think anything's accidental. Why did the tumor manifest? And that could be because of an emotional transgression. It could be because of a habit of thought and interpreting the world transgression that is interfering with the flow of chi in the body. And sometimes it's purely environmental. It's in the physical dimension. You're living next to a nuclear power plant. It's like, that's not good for you. So I'm not saying everything and every illness that we get is a result of our emotions or our thoughts. Sometimes the physical conditions create physical problems. But in the broader context of this discussion, I believe that health, that there is no such thing as perfect health in this world. I don't think anybody's in perfect health. I don't think anyone will ever be in perfect health. I think you graduate from one set of slightly stressful conditions to a different set of stressful conditions. I believe that's the human condition on this planet. That doesn't mean to me, oh, you're sick, give up, don't try to fix it, let's just do away with medicine and live through our karma. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in my belief system, as soon as you've peeled back one layer of physical, emotional, or mental obstruction that's causing you distress, then the next layer of karma comes to the surface. It's actually an opportunity for you to go even deeper into your mental and emotional life. And that I think that we're always moving from one source of irritation and discomfort to the next one. And I just think that the bright side of that sort of pessimistic picture is that every time we overcome a physical distress, a mental distress, an emotional distress, we gain peace and we gain wisdom. And the next problem that comes, which is inevitable, it will come. It doesn't knock us around the way that it might have when we were younger and hadn't overcome these problems. I don't believe that problems ever end. But what I do believe is that the spirit can become so big and the spirit can become so attuned with whatever higher forces are guiding it that these problems do not become as consequential when they arise. You're always going to have problems, but some people break literally, mentally, emotionally, physically, and other people don't. And I think that reflects a growth of the spirit. I do not believe that more spiritual people are healthier. That may or may not be the case. I've known some very unspiritual people who are never sick, and they don't die of cancer, and they live to be 90. And I know very sensitive, spiritual, generous, kind people who died when they were 40. I do not believe there's an equation, a balance between spirituality and health. I think that's false. I believe that your karma is going to determine how much and how frequently and how desperately you get sick. And what you can do with your spiritual self is that if that spirit rises and rises in knowledge and understanding, in compassion and wisdom, not just for yourself, but for all people, then when this karma comes, whatever it is, it's not going to knock you around. You'll be able to see it as something passing through you rather than something that's literally killing you.
Yeah, I love that. That's so deep, really beautiful approach. But what do you think a person can do when I think, okay, I want to try this, I want to get into meditation and see what comes up? Do I need a teacher, or can I try it by myself? What would be the best approach to do that?
I think in any field of study, having a teacher nearby is useful, but in my own life, I always started on my own. I read Hatha Yoga books and started practicing and teaching Hatha Yoga before I ever had a teacher. And in meditation, my first meditations that I did, I learned on my own. And, having met people then later who meditate and are in the same tradition, it's like, it was invaluable. But I don't think you need to wait around. I would sort of put it like this. I think that if you're inspired by a magazine article or a book or a philosophy, or in the modern era, Google it, that you can start and you can learn a lot in this era. But I think what keeps you going, what will make it a part of your life, is the people that you meet and the people that you practice with. So I don't think you need to wait around or get hit by a peacock feather to be initiated into yoga. I'm actually sort of averse to that tradition and to that idea. But I think it would be highly unusual, and in my experience, I can't think of one, where you're going to continue to grow in your meditation and continue in your meditations without a sangha, without a group, and without the advice of someone who's further down the road than you.
Yeah, I totally agree. But do you think there is anything else we can do to activate our self-healing capacity? Or what do you think, what else is important to stay healthy besides yoga?
There's so many things. We're three-dimensional creatures. I think that some people, some books, they emphasize your diet. They emphasize where you live. They emphasize, the physical dimension. And I think it'd be absolutely foolish to deny that doesn't have an impact on your life and your health. I don't think you can eat junk and semi-poisonous materials and survive on that very long. And so there are approaches in the physical dimension that you need to deal with. I mean, I think of people who live in stressful, war-torn, famine-torn, disease-torn, civil war-torn parts of the world. Look, they just need food and water. It's like, that's their need. And then I think the next step up is the emotional. And the emotional, I think, is an urban, modern, stressful problem more than it was ever in the past. And I think that we do need emotional support. And I think that's why people go to yoga classes. I think people go to yoga classes primarily because of the support they get of the people who are in the class. At least that's my opinion. I think that if you had to choose between staying home and doing a practice that's perfect for you, or actually being part of a group that you enjoy, and maybe the practice isn't perfect for you, but you'll just skip over the hard parts, I think that going to the class is more useful for most people. And I think it's because just being in a space with people who are trying to become introspective and healing and all that kind of things affects you emotionally. I mean, this is an old idea. If you go back to the Upanishads and other Indian scriptures, which I'm most familiar with, the idea that if you want to acquire a characteristic, whether it's emotional stability or a different type of emotion, don't be as hot-tempered, be more kind in your speech, you want to be smarter, you want to, learn to study more, read longer. The most important thing you can do is to hang out with people who have the quality that you want. That's the most important thing you can do, is to hang out with the people who already have the quality that you want. And I think that you have to search those things out. I think that whether it's searching out an acupuncturist who gets to know you over time is as important as the skill of the acupuncturist. It's like, as in anything, there are acupuncturists who are gifted and acupuncturists who, they never get past the formulas they learned in school. But even if you're not particularly gifted at reading the energy and sticking the needle in exactly the right place and exactly the right number of needles, if you are compassionate and interested in your clientele, they will start telling you things that they would never tell anybody else. And just the expression of those things to you is healing for them. You don't have to be all knowing. You don't even know what to tell them back. Just them expressing it to a sympathetic ear, to someone who's slightly skilled in the medical profession, is incredibly healing. And so I think that unless you're really, really advanced person, where you can progress sitting in a cave or doing a solitary retreat, and I do believe those people exist, I think the company you keep is all important. And I think that the different types of yoga classes that are around and available and is really a good thing. It's a good modern thing that now we have a variety of yoga classes, a variety of different communities. Each of them have a different bhava, a different feeling, a different tone to them. I think that seeking the help, seeking the company of other human beings is one of the most important things that you can do.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think there is anything else which is important you want to share for people to stay healthy? What maybe you want to share your own health secret, because you're amazing for being 60.
Yeah, I don't know. You've covered a lot of ground. We've covered a lot of ground. I think that I would just repeat, what I've said before. We're multidimensional creatures, and our karma seems to come at us in those different dimensions at different phases in your life. And it's one of the things that Susie and I talk about and have talked about for 20 years. When we're out walking, we have a dog, we're out walking twice a day. When we're out walking with the dog and we reflect on what's bothering us, what do you wake up preoccupied with? When you sit down and to meditate, what is the thought you have to push out of your head? It changes as the years go by. It just changes. Your concerns when you're 20, your concerns when you're 30, your concerns when you're 40, they just change. And it's like one set of problems isn't a problem anymore because the kids are all grown, but they get replaced with a different set of preoccupations. And I think that seeing that life is this progression like this, that one set of problems and concerns that you had when you just wanted to fit in with school in 20 years will have no impact on your life. Unfortunately, you'll have a totally different set of problems. And I think we have to be aware of them. I think that having a habit of reflecting on what you're thinking about before and after meditation, I think would be a very useful thing. And I'm not talking about whether or not you see God. I'm talking about make a note of what thought you have to push out of your mind to sit. And what thought pops back into your mind when you're done sitting. And it's usually distressingly mundane. It's money, it's health, it's relationships, the big three that have never changed. And I think that you just have that habit. What thoughts do you need to put aside to sit? And what thoughts jump back into your head when you're done sitting? And if you keep a record of those, even a brief note, just brief notes to yourself, you can see patterns and preoccupations in your life. And I think getting that big picture like that is incredibly useful. And I think that if you don't do that, if you don't keep little notes to yourself that you can look back and see the big pattern, it's not going to happen to you accidentally that you're going to see these patterns in your life. So that's what I would suggest. One more time, make a note of what thoughts you push out of your mind when you go to sit, or what do you push out of your mind when you do your yin yoga class? And what thoughts jump right back into your head as soon as you're done with your yin yoga or your meditation? Make a note of these things. Don't be a slave to them and don't ignore them. Make a note of them, and then you yourself can see patterns, good patterns and not so good patterns. And I think in that way, you're slowly taking some control, having some influence on the things that keep you healthy and happy, and the things that do not contribute to making you healthy and happy.
Yeah, and probably also your great sense of humor. That's probably also one of the pillars that you are so in such great health, right? Always laughing.
I think it's important that we have a phrase, Susie and I, we have a phrase that that the spiritual life is the most important thing that you will ever do. However small your progress may seem, it's the most important thing in your life. It seems like other things are more important when you're younger, but as you get older, you realize that it's not true. But the stamina for the spiritual life is really increased if you can have a sense of humor. And we've been blessed, Susie and I. We've met maybe 3, 4, 5 people who I think, I couldn't prove it to you, but I think are very highly enlightened people. And none of them were somber or depressed. None of them were somber or depressed. In fact, a couple of them that I can think of were quite funny. And sometimes their humor was almost dark, but not quite. And so I think that humor is important. And I don't think we all manifest humor in the same way. Some of us are quietly humorous and quietly amused by things, and others are more outgoing. But I think the stamina for spiritual practice is increased if you have laughter, if you have a sense of humor. I think it was Yogananda's guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar. One time he passed through a very serious illness, nearly died. And Yogananda came to him, found him sitting up in bed, chuckling and being of good spirits. And Yogananda goes, I'm paraphrasing now, but it's very close. He says, Master, I heard you were nearly dying, and yet I find you in such good humor. And Yukteswar looked at him and said, a sad saint is a sad saint. And that same guy, and Yukteswar was you see a picture of Yukteswar, he was a very serious guy. That same guy said to Yogananda, quotes him saying to some of the young disciples around him, lighten up, cheer up. The path to God is not a funeral march.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
Paul, where can people find you?
PaulGrilley.com.
You only do teacher trainings, right? You don't do classes anymore, do you?
That's gone up and down over the years. It's dependent on the circumstances where we've lived. Until very, very recently, this last little where we're living, it's not conducive. We're too far outside of the town and stuff where we live. But we've actually, Susie and I have almost always taught at least once or twice a week wherever we have lived. But this last few years has been unusual that we haven't. But for the most part, yes, we're most accessible to people by attending TT programs that are advertised on our website.
Okay, and I'm very much looking forward to joining that again, hopefully next year.
Oh, that'd be great. That's the thing about the earlier part of the conversation is that the people who come to the courses, are really important to Susie and I. And it isn't because, you know, our courses are better than anyone else's. It's just that when you're with a group of like-minded people studying philosophy and meditation, that carries you for a long time. It carries you for a long time, just whether it's 5 days or a week or whatever it is, because sometimes you can feel really alone in your ambitions and in your practices. And when you come together and you go like, wow, there's a bunch of people, there's 30 other people here who are just as interested as I am, and having 5 days to share your experience, if only to share your enthusiasm. I know for Susie and us, Susie and I, it's incredibly rewarding. And I think that gets back to that, to what we talked about earlier, that one of the most important things you can do for your health, mental, emotional, and physical, is really examine who you hang out with and find a way to hang out with those people who have those qualities that you desire.
Yes, for sure. Paul, thank you so very much for sharing your wisdom with us. And that was an enlightening interview. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.